support people on low incomes across the UK with money guidance, employment support and digital skills. Jeff will explain a little bit more about what we do as part of his presentation. But the Quids-In Professional Network is dedicated to ending hardship and poverty across the UK by uniting professionals who share this mission. It's made up primarily of practitioners working within social housing, local authorities, financial capability, digital inclusion, welfare support, and so on. Many of you are already a member of this network, as well as the Money Guiders Wales network, but there will be opportunities to sign up at the end if not. Income maximisation and steps into work, how money guiders and frontline practitioners who are non-employment specialists can support their clients or tenants back into work or into work for the first time. There will be a link at the end to a feedback form, so please fill that out if you can. That would be great. Also, as I say, there will be a Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions, please add them in the chat as we go along, and we will come to them at the end of the session, or there'll be opportunities for people to actually ask the questions themselves. So I'd like to hand over to Jeff Mitchell, who's the founder and the managing director of Clean Slate Training and Employment, which is home to Quids-In. So over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm also a bit croaky today, so if I pause, it might be to mute myself and have a good old cough. But yeah, thanks to everyone for coming. I'm going to be talking about, as Lisa said, income max and steps into employment. Just a bit about me. As Lisa said, I founded Clean Slate. This is our 20th anniversary year. And also Quids-In magazine, which is now Quids-In Money Guidance Service, which I'll come on to in a second. It's worth also mentioning that before I set up Clean Slate, I was managing director at The Big Issue, the magazine sold by homeless people. That kind of comes into context with some of what I want to talk about, and a kind of, I guess you might notice a kind of unshakable belief in the potential of people to do some form of work as they go through, and that a lot of that comes from that experience there. So to get started then, right, so I'm going to quickly introduce or reintroduce Clean Slate and Quids-In. I should add that I've packed way too much into this presentation. You might want to see the recording and actually slow it down rather than speed it up to actually catch up with, keep up with some of what I'm saying. But I'm going to whiz through, but there will be time for questions at the end. I'm going to look at some of the barriers to helping people maximise their income. And how hardship sometimes gets in the way, how welfare is critical, but it is just one of the tools that we have to help people maximise their income. I'm going to do a quick overview of the Get Britain Working agenda from the government so that we understand what context we're working in, and then move on into how we can help people release and realise their potential. And especially the role of money guiders in that process, working in the gap between what people need and the provision that is provided in the mainstream, and how we can inspire people, and a bit about some of the work that we do within Clean Slate that actually engages with long-term unemployed people who face barriers, in the hope that that might help inspire you too. So just to introduce Clean Slate and Quids-In, Clean Slate Training and Employment runs Quids-In Money Guidance. Everything that we do is about helping people out of hardship by improving their financial well-being and resilience. There's three strands that we work to. So we help people manage their money better, to help them gain employment, and also to get online in order to manage their money and to find employment. And we also run the Quids-In Pro network, which is a network of professionals committed to work, supporting people who are in poverty, supporting them out of poverty across the UK. We have a range of services under Clean Slate and Quids-In Money Guidance, actually, I'd probably start with the magazines and guides. We have an information service which is led by Quids In magazine, and an email service which I'll come on to in a second. And we have digital tools and resources to support that activity as well that are online. And then we have in-person and virtual services, so one-to-one, either through drop-in centres dotted across England and Wales primarily. We have training workshops that we offer as well, and we have a remote guidance service where we can work, for instance, with housing associations or household support fund organisers to take referrals and support people through and out of financial hardship by phone and online. To just give you a flavour of what Quids In is about, so you can immediately see it's not like something that people might receive from more formal or statutory sources. It's very much more designed to be like take a break. We have quarterly guides. We have specialist guides like this one to loan sharks, on loan sharks, which we also have in Welsh. We have a range of guides that are specific. So this one's on universal credit, but we also have ones on new tenancies, on food, on heat, light and power to reduce bills as well. And we have an email service that helps, that works pretty much like Money Saving Expert, but is not for profit and dedicated to people who might be social tenants, unemployed, benefit claimants, but really sort of digging out the up-to-date, the latest information, telling them about things that have changed to the benefit entitlements, for example, and we're sort of building that that list of subscribers that we reach each month with that service. Way back at the end of the pandemic, we had actually grown as an organisation through lockdown and had recruited a number of people that we had never even met. And when we got together, we found that everyone was very much on the same page about what is needed and what Clean Slate was delivering. And we created a community pledge, which was essentially, we see you, we hear you, we are you. We noticed and we understood that people feel that they're not very well accounted for in sort of policy and service provision, and they want to be heard and they want to have their say. And in terms of how we include people in our organisation, we have an elements programme, which is where we recognise their expertise through lived experience, and we provide mentorship elements, and we bring them on board, firstly on a 12-week paid work placement, as part of our team as trainees, and then if as and when we have vacancies, they are kind of our sort of priority list. And there's about 60% of our frontline staff now are former service users and people with lived experience of financial hardship. We do a reader survey every 2 years. There's another one due through Quids In magazine later this year, and that gives us a lot of information about the needs and experiences of people who are in financial hardship. So the first thing I want to share is some of the information that we received from our last reader survey, which, given that the magazine is all about financial well-being, is a kind of de facto cost of living survey. We received around 1,100 responses, and about 840 were verified as social tenants. So all of the results were that we used within our research relates to social tenants. We can see from this slide straight away that almost half were working age but not able to work, potentially through disabilities or health conditions, but also they may have childcare or caring responsibilities. This comes to bear when we look at the segments by working age, by working status and age. So we found that 3% of people who were beyond working age had said that they faced serious financial problems. This rose significantly to 14% amongst people who are working age but in work, whether part-time or full-time, and 20% amongst that big group who were working age but not able to work. We also found that the indicators of financial or lack of financial well-being and resilience were reflected in when we looked at those segments across the board. So we could see that 45% of people who were working age but unable to work were falling behind with bills, compared to 22% of the rest of our audience. 21% of those were in rent arrears compared to 11%, and 34% were struggling with debt repayments compared to 16% of other groups. They were also more likely to have self-disconnected broadband, to have requested the prepayment meter, and to turn to loan sharks or informal lenders. A large number of as in general, that group were less likely to be in control of their money, understanding what was coming in or going out financially, had fewer savings, and less easily able to access ID documents. So not only does that create a barrier to accessing many benefits now, especially universal credit, is also a requirement. ID documents would be a requirement for finding employment as well, increasingly so at the moment. And also, if people don't have access to ID documents, it has occurred to us that this could be a red flag for financial abuse as well. So it's one of the things that people are surprised that we ask, and then they understand the rationale. So if people's lives are affected and they are limited in what they can, really the headspace that they have to be able to do, to think about work, to think about their health, to think about accessing benefits they might be missing out on, it's kind of like a catch-22, because people are just worried about keeping food on the table and a roof over their head. So for us, our starting point is, right, okay, one of the potential quick wins that can be achieved is by doing a benefits check using an online benefits calculator. There's plenty around. This one is from the one on the screen is from the Money Helper website, the MAPS Money Helper website, and there's 24 billion pounds of unclaimed benefit according to policy and practice, sort of in government coffers at the moment. That could be released to help the people we're working with to get their heads above water and to think about the other things that they could do to improve their well-being and resilience. It's a way to clear the financial blockers. For us, clean slate training and employment, welfare would be the springboard into other opportunities that might give them more financial independence than relying on welfare long term. But obviously not everyone is able to work or able to work at the moment. We work in partnership with Invest, who are the providers of the benefits calculator on the MAPS website. They told us this week that 2/3 of the people that use that benefits calculator identify that they could be £4,000 a year better off. Not all of that is realised. A lot of people don't go on to claim it. Obviously, the benefits calculators only provide a guide, but they're reasonably good. And even if people aren't entitled to more, at least they have the peace of mind to know that they've done a thing to check whether or not there might be more out there, rather than not knowing. But where possible, where people are receive that uplift from benefits, it provides more security, more dignity, and not having to think about the immediate financial problems, to room to breathe and think ahead to the future. Get Britain Working was the initiative launched by the UK government. The idea is to put £1 billion into initiatives that help people with health conditions and disabilities to be able to access work. It promised tailored employment support, training and skills, support for employers to create more inclusive workplaces. It said there would be more online and digital resources, such as courses, coaching, job search facilities, and a right to try guarantee, which would mean that there wasn't a hard stop if somebody was on was a long-term benefit claimant and decided they wanted to try out work and put a toe in the water, that they wouldn't automatically be switched off from benefits. What was announced was changes to and eventually the phasing out of work capability assessments, and an announcement of £125 million for work health and skills support in places like Blaenau Gwent, Denbighshire and Neath Port Talbot. Obviously, in the context of Wales, there is a high level among the highest levels of economic activity across the UK, and a lot of long-term sickness and disability-related benefit claims. In theory, the devolved leadership and government, those regional partnerships, should be able to aid and support joined-up delivery and localised solutions, bringing together health partners with employment support programmes, with skills and training. One of the initiatives that has now started to ramp up is Workwell, and that's primarily often led by integrated care boards to deliver a local employment initiative. Clean Slate and Quids in Money Guidance is part of the partnership in Bristol on the pilot that has been run and runs up to the end of March. One of the things that we're concerned about is actually the understanding in the health sector of how employment works for people. There is a tendency, like there are in other sectors, to see employment as something that once they've got everything else sorted out, employment proves they've made it. Well, actually, the benefits of employment can increase people's confidence, a sense of purpose, all those kind of mental well-being elements of employment. And I don't think that has been really sort of worked through before jumping in feet first with the Workwell initiative. Our Money First approach addresses both health determinants as well as blockers to employment, but we're being judged on employment outcomes alone. And so I think there's a more sophisticated understanding of how Workwell can work well. And I think that I'd like to see more sort of real world understanding of health inequalities and actually what the drivers are there, so that when we work together as employment support programs and alongside health programs, that there's a shared understanding of what we need to move out of the way if people are going to move into employment. In terms of Get Britain Working, critics are concerned that the work capability assessment reforms are slower than anticipated. Critics are a large group and come from lots of different perspectives. It hasn't happened quickly enough. But of course, one of the reasons why it hasn't happened very quickly is because there was a very successful pushback about the insecurity and anxiety that was being created by the idea of the work capability assessments being taken away from people who are currently on disability benefits, for example. There's also a concern about that's kind of being more stick than carrots, and that people will be pushed into work, which can also make people anxious and actually less able to work. Of course, there needs to be the availability of employment and employer goodwill for engaging either with initiatives or being more inclusive in their practices for recruiting people. There are ongoing benefit traps and conditionality placed upon claimants that could trigger benefit cuts and actually deepen poverty and hardship, which in turn will help make people less employable. And I think there's a massive and sometimes unspoken challenge around changing the culture where households may be dependent on benefits, actually households, families, communities who see a life on benefits as the norm. I think there's some consideration to be made of some of those realities. So with all that in mind and those challenges, but 20 years of experience under our belt as Clean Slate training and employment, and Quids in Money Guidance, helping clear those financial blockers to finding work, we need to think about how we inspire change. And this is what we really want to share today. Firstly, we're talking about engaging around money first. If people can't think about the future because they're worried about keeping food on the table, then let's help make sure they can keep food on the table. So that's one less thing they have to worry about. Let's find the quick wins. Let's put people in control, make them feel like actually change is possible and it can be positive, and that their minds are more open to bigger goals in future. Let's do some myth busting, especially around universal credit, for example, which in many ways, but not always, does facilitate people moving into work without the sort of switch offs that the legacy benefits had, or you started work, therefore you don't get any benefits. But it's kind of helping people to navigate that system so that they constantly experience, they feel and value a sense of becoming better off as they take on work. Not only better off in the financial sense, but also in terms of the social contact, something to get out of bed in the morning for, a sense of purpose, and a sense of kind of self-esteem from earning your own money. So as trusted messengers, our message needs to be, you can do it. So we need to be able to believe in people in the first place, find the things that they can do, and encourage them through small steps, building their confidence and helping them realize that there are opportunities that they can go for. In a second, I'm going to come on to our role as money guiders, and how I think that puts us in a unique and hugely positive position to actually champion some of these messages. But I'm going to go into how we do that at Clean Slate. And one of the first things that I want to do is just to pause for a moment and ask you to be involved in one of the processes that we go through, which is asking job seekers to consider their proudest achievement as a starting point. I think Lisa's going to take over at this second.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. So if you could all put in the chat, just off the top of your head, the first thing that comes to mind, what is your proudest achievement? Probably outside of the workplace. What is your proudest achievement to date? And as I say, don't spend too much time on it. It's just just first thing that comes to your mind. Thank you, Kate. You've written my children. Yeah, I was going to add that. That would also be mine. My children are 12 and 15, and at the moment they're quite nice human beings. They're quite kind. They're considerate. So that's probably my proudest achievement. Helen performing at a sellout concert in the Glasgow Royal Concert Hall. Goodness me, that's impressive. Wow. A few others have said children adopting, amazing. Yeah. Children, excellent. Anything else that anyone else would like to add? Jeff, did you want to share your proudest achievement?
Mine's a bit of a cheat, because I suppose the one thing that I had always wanted to do was to write and publish a book. And I did, and I managed to do that, and I got it crowdfunded. That is definitely something that I'm really proud of, in terms of it being outside work. But it is a book about the work that we do, so it's kind of like maybe I'm just really dull, and that's all I've got to talk about. But
no, we'll let you have that one. We'll let you have that. Performed as support to a famous poet. Amazing. One of my projects won an award. That's great. Well done, Britta. Great achievements there. Thank you, everybody.
Should we go on to the next part, Lisa? Should we go on to the next part of the exercise?
Yep.
Yeah. So I want everyone to think about one of the examples, and I think I'm going to pick on this idea of performing at a major sellout concert, right? In the chat, can everyone put in the skills and qualities that you think someone who would be able to perform at a major sellout concert would have to have? So I'll start with confidence. Yeah, there is.
Glasgow Royal Concert Hall at that. I mean, goodness me, that's not a small venue. Yeah. Confidence, creativity, absolutely. Self-belief.
Yeah. Musicality,
opportunity. Good vocal skills, resilience, absolutely. Influence, stamina. Confidence, skills, support from crew and group, stage experience, financial backers. Working as a team as well.
Yeah. This is all great. And what you can see happening here is, now imagine you're running a session with a group of homeless people, and someone there says, no one can employ me. I can't put a CV together. I've only been clean of drugs for 6 months. And I'm leading that group. Let's say hypothetically, let's say it happened just after we'd launched Clean Slate. I pause that conversation and I speak to all the other homeless people in the room, and I say, forget that this individual has just disclosed that they've only been clean of drugs for 6 months and have never had a job before that. What skills and qualities do you think that person has? And they started, and I wrote them up on a flip chart, and they started to say confidence, determination, motivation, goal orientated, disciplined, and we had 25 skills and qualities listed against that. It's not necessarily the most attractive to an employer as an example of where people have used those skills, but I asked the individual to then shortlist those down to 5 or 6 that she could really identify with, and now give us different examples of when she'd been confident, motivated, self-disciplined. And you could see her stature grow as she sat there. And she did end up with a CV, and she was able to populate it with examples of when she'd used these skills and qualities. And she was able to add her elevator pitch or personal statement at the start, which she wanted as part of her 12 steps. She wanted to be honest about the fact that she had had some problems, but she talked about how she was at a point in her life where she turned a corner and she was ready to prove herself, and she wanted to use these skills in a new role. And it just, as I said, it happened very early in so almost 20 years ago, and I could say I think we're onto something here. I'm not sure anything from mainstream provision takes time to really engage with people about how much they have to offer in a way that then they can take that into the sort of job application process, and the confidence to actually present yourself to employers. I should mention as a PS, that individual now runs her own company, she runs her own business, and she's got a family of her own. And that's not because of anything I did, that's because it was all inside her already. She just needed the activation, really. Okay, so I'm going to go on, I'm going to move us on to the rest of my presentation. I suspect I've been rambling on a little bit, so I'm going to whiz up a little bit. So I mentioned just now that I think the role of money guiders is incredibly important in this process of change for people who are long-term unemployed. We are generally closer to people. We're more likely to speak their language, understand their wants and needs. As I said, you know, how often do employment support programs, there are individual staff who will do this, but programs stop to think about actually this person's not going to move on until they're able to feed their kids and make sure their rent is paid. That trust, that connection, the empathy and mutual respect that comes from working within communities or closely with people who are in hardship is difficult to replicate in a formal institution setting. We have the opportunity to build people's confidence and self-belief and take a money-first approach, clear those obstacles that are in the way of thinking about bigger picture or longer term things, and not just employment, their health, the mental well-being, the quality of life for their family. We can help people, put people in control and champion their independence. And also I think that working within communities in often what is a less formal setting, helping people just organize their money, is an opportunity to bring people in who have lived experience. So I mentioned that we have an elements program for us where we have experts through lived experience and they join our team. This is like hugely important as a way to create that connection with people. And then once people know how much they have to offer and they have the confidence to go get it, they can actually access and make use of mainstream employment support. I'm not going to go through this slide particularly, except to say, you know, we believe that income max is more than benefits, claiming benefits. And just to reiterate what I said earlier, which was that we do accept not everyone is ready for work. It can be a long process for getting people ready for work, but where people can, it offers that sort of dignity and that self-control. Right, so for a second, I'm going to pause. It is a little bit more of me. Beth is one of our workers who works in South Wales. She supports job seekers, and we've had a service recently in Monmouthshire, and she couldn't make it today, so I did a short pre-record with her, and I'm going to share with you what she had to say. Hi Beth, thanks for joining us for this little Q&A section of the webinar. I've got a few questions. Obviously, you've got your boots on the ground in Wales, and it would be good just to get your insights on the employment support that you've been providing, which is very often sort of money first. You're sort of really au fait with the things that we're up against. If it's okay, can I just jump in feet first with the with some questions? So I'm just going to ask you to start with, just to give us a bit of a background about the employment support work that you're doing in Monmouth.
Yeah, sure. Bore da. We here at Clean Slate were given the opportunity by DWP to work for 12 weeks with a group of individuals who have been long-term unemployed. So obviously the ultimate goal is for these people to get back into work, although what we provide goes much beyond that, as our support is tailored to the individual. So we have a holistic approach to every pathway we do. And at the start of our employment pathway, we complete a job readiness quiz with every individual. And as we believe in a money first approach, like you just said, to employment support, our money health check questions are embedded and integrated into the quiz. So we look at building confidence, getting the individual to overcome barriers, discover their skills and attributes. We can also signpost them to a variety of support options to help on that journey.
Yeah,
yeah.
Brilliant. That's really good background. So what kind of financial barriers do get in the way of that journey back to work?
One of the main financial barriers would be that transition from benefits to receiving a wage and the uncertainty that comes with that. Although obviously Universal Credit has tried to address this by becoming more aligned with the monthly wages, it could be up to 6 weeks before you receive your first pay. Other barriers could include individuals not budgeting for that first month, not thinking about those extra little costs that come with employment, such as the travel, the clothing, the childcare, increase in council tax, for example. There are also other hidden costs to consider eventually, such as things like dentistry, site tests. Everything like this needs to be considered and budgeted for. Yeah, a lot of things to think about, really.
Yeah, right. And what other kind of barriers do people face, you know, especially thinking about people who feel unable to work because of health issues?
Yeah, so many people I have worked with have a health condition, whether it be physical or mental health condition. They could experience employer stigma and not be seen as a viable option for the team, maybe. And even once they get into the workplace, there could be negative attitudes towards them. Many locations have inaccessible workplaces, whether it be physical, digital, or maybe have a lack of policy for their needs. There may be a lack of tailored support in flexible working environments, as well as other financial concerns about losing their benefits. Barriers to employment can include lack of skills and experience. Communication skills is quite highly sought after. There may be long gaps in employment history, systemic issues such as housing. And although in policy there should be no discrimination, I still find there's age, race, or other protected characteristic discrimination leading to negative attitudes and unfair treatment in the recruitment process. So one of the largest barriers, though, I do see with people is that fear of change, especially continuing theme with those on lower income. They can build up a wall of fear that in reality may not be as big as they think it is. So helping bringing down that wall can allow them to gain a bit of resilience and having a better mentality, becoming more prepared to enter the world of employment. Mm-hmm. So our program tried to take account of those barriers, and we work with clients to challenge their pre-existing ideas that might fuel the fears that they may have.
It's a big one, isn't it? Getting over that sort of bridge and that that people's preconceptions about what change is, and that change always feels like it's a trap, or it might be a bad thing. It's interesting, and that change of mindset, I guess, is why we have to look at more than just employment, I guess. So although it's an employment service that you offer, how are you tackling their money worries in order to clear some of those obstacles?
Yeah, as we previously mentioned, we'd start with that job readiness quiz, and this details a money first approach. We check the clients receiving all the benefits they're entitled to and encourage them to apply for any of those unclaimed benefits. We complete a budget planner detailing income and outgoings, see if there's any reduction in costs can be made, such as lowering energy costs, switching low income tariffs with utilities. All the large water companies have low income tariffs, as well as fixed price tariffs for those who might need to use more water. And many people do not realise if they're out of contract with their mobile and broadband, they could significantly save by shopping around. You can also switch to a pay-as-you-go tariff that might help your finances. There's been many instances of tariffs or subscriptions being reduced if you try and cancel them. And there might be some individuals who haven't checked their bank statements in a while, forgetting about any hidden direct debit payments or other subscriptions they might have forgotten about. So we try and delve deeper into their finances and look at other aspects such as pension forecasts and tax reliefs. And hopefully by the end of engagement, we also try to get the client to think about saving money a little bit, however little that might be. So those are a few of the examples of the things that we might look at with clients on their journey.
Yeah, good to hear about savings. It's savings week this week, apparently. So it's always it's a good thing to mention along the way. I think that what always strikes me is that pressing concern about money and feeling like it's kind of out of our control. I mean, it feels like a key step, and actually in terms of embracing change as well. How much do you have to build up someone's sense of confidence and control before they can see employment as an option? And by this point, are they more inclined to take specialist help to overcome other hurdles, like with their health, their housing, or their debts?
It can obviously vary by individual, but once we have dealt with that potential financial issue, we can look at building a solid foundation involving focusing on small, achievable steps and getting that individual to recognise their strengths and what they might want to achieve. This is a start to developing a positive mindset and to challenge those negative thoughts that people might have. Maybe this can be achieved through methods like goal setting, empowering them to take control, and also to have self-compassion. We are almost always harder on ourselves than others. Once we get this foundation, individuals may be more receptive to accessing that specialist support for those complex challenges, and having a greater confidence enables them to perceive the difficulties as solvable problems rather than overwhelming obstacles. And then we can look more closely at preparing them for things like the job application, CV building, and interview techniques, and getting them closer to the world of work.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's important to see very much a step-by-step process, something I'll come back to sort of in the rest of this webinar as well. But one of the other things that I'll be looking at as well is the kind of what I think is a unique take on employment support for people who face particular barriers to the job market, really, around our 7 signs. I'm not going to list all of it. Well, I might list the 7, but I'm not going to go into loads of detail. But vision, skills, passions, knowing what employers want, being able to ask for help, motivation, being able to present all that by the time you're ready to find work. What are the 2 or 3 of those that you lean into when working with someone who's unemployed?
Out of the 7, I would definitely try and get the individual to understand and know what skills they have and how they can demonstrate those skills, whether it be on their CV or in an interview. This can be vital when looking for work, as most applications and interviews will ask questions to see if those skills match up with the job specification. This will inevitably lead to being able to understand what the employer might want, and as many skills are transferable, and being able to demonstrate with solid examples can also elucidate other skills that could align with the person specification. So by understanding your skills, you can develop that vision for what work you might want to do, as well as discovering what you might find rewarding in life. Of course, I would always advocate asking for help, whether it be from Job Centre in terms of other things like interview clothing, in travel to work costs and things, or for asking for specialist help with debts and finances. I think also that the elevator pitch that can be discussed is underused. Could you sum yourself up and sell yourself in 30 seconds? It's so useful to be able to succinctly describe yourself at any time to anyone. And this could be the key to networking and finding your dream job, really.
Yeah, no, I think it feels all of that feels such a long way off for people. But actually, if you can break it down into thinking about things that people have done before, successes they might not realize as successes. I know I've as a tutor, I found that, you know, sometimes people go, oh, nothing, I've raised a family. It's like, well, let's look at the transferable skills you have from that, you know, and the qualities that people have as a parent. You know, it just gets that conversation moving. But it's still, and for people, for money guiders who haven't necessarily had much experience on the sort of like promoting employment as a key way to maximize income, it might sound counterintuitive that someone who's unemployed and struggling to keep food on the table might not see employment as the solution to start with. You know, they might say, well, I don't want a job, I just want to be able to feed my kids. And it's kind of, well, you know, that's, you know, to us it looks like one of the solutions. You know, and I've seen people who felt like everything is hopeless. You know, when we were working during the pandemic and commissioned by DWP Wales to work with people who are in financial crisis. You know, the stories we were hearing are the sort of like the despair in some ways was quite shocking. But we found, perhaps unexpectedly to start with, that by getting stuck into people's financial situation and giving them some simple steps to follow, identifying some quick wins, and going through that financial coaching process, they actually started to feel in control and started to kind of, they ticked off all the other things they could do. And it's like, actually, maybe now is time to find a job, especially if they still had a negative budget after going through that whole process. Is that something you've experienced? Tell us more, if it is, tell us more about what happened.
Yeah, in our role, we see a lot of this on a regular basis. Obviously, unemployment can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, especially if you're looking for work and there's loads of job rejections, and they reinforce those feelings of being worthless. So there's a lot of psychological burden that drains your energy, and that's what, you know, needed for job searching activities. And like you mentioned, financial hardship can also limit those cognitive resources that are needed, trapping individuals in a scarcity mentality. So they're always prioritizing immediate crisis over any goals. And this can also lead to making poor decisions. There's something called the benefit cliff that can create a real big disincentive for work. So it's the benefit cliff occurs when a small increase in income from a new job results in a sudden significant loss of government benefits. And for some, working a low wage job can result in an even lower net income than they might have had on benefits, making the choice to stay unemployed for more period, a rational financial decision. However, we really have to look at what employment offers, and it's much more than just a wage. It does foster personal growth, social interaction, giving a purpose and improve mental and physical health. Moving into work even starts with a small step, can build confidence, empower individuals, open doors to other career advancements, further skill developments and education, enhancing financial stability down the road. So there's always going to be a scenario when the individual will be better off in work, whether they're completing benefit off calculations to find what best hours and wage they might be. So, you know, they might be more suited to that individual, a better work-life balance. So it's more about building that confidence. And
Hello, I think we've got a bit of a pause there.
further career advancement, financial stability. So the journey from unemployment is about more than just earning a paycheck. It's about gaining that confidence and control to build a happier, more secure life.
Yeah. No, I think I start rattling on at that point. So I'm just going to move us on. That was Beth. I love chatting to the frontline workers and just seeing how they're finding things. Their insights are so helpful for sharing with sort of our peers across this network. For starters, I've got a couple more things. Talking of rattling on, I've got a couple more things to cover before winding up, but I'll sort of whiz through these. I mentioned in that clip that we worked with DWP Wales during the pandemic. Over that time, we worked with about 1,100 job seekers who were referred to us, either for a 12-week money coaching program or a 6-week money coaching program, and we were able to sort of generate financial gains of 1.3 million across that group, and more than half of that came from paid work. And ironically, it was not a time when DWP was asking us to generate job outcomes, and the perception was, well, you know, we're in lockdown, there aren't many jobs. But of course, for the people we were talking to, delivery jobs, warehouse jobs, retail was absolutely fine as a place to start. So we did find that people were quite motivated to get into that. I seem to stop the presentation. Bear with me a sec. Yeah, the way that we work, Beth there mentioned the job readiness quiz. Actually, we have a range of different assessment tools which we present publicly as quizzes. What typically happens is that people are referred to us, whether that's by DWP, a landlord, a local authority, and we will then take people through a sort of a set of questions, 25 yes/no questions, to get a sense of people's financial well-being and resilience, and then we can start building, and that automatically triggers an action plan, and we can build a kind of coaching plan to take people through that over a period of 3, 6, 12 weeks. It also generates a score. So if somebody says, yes, I could keep food on the table if my money dropped by a little bit, then they'd score a point. And if they said, no, I couldn't do that, it would generate a chunk of information which would form the first step of their action plan. And that process goes through. We take people through the coaching, and then at the end of the service, they go back to that assessment tool, to that quiz, and then we see how many of those questions that were answered no in the first instance become yes. So we can actually demonstrate distance traveled. We can identify financial gains against each of those issues, really, and demonstrate impact from the program. I'm not expecting you to be able to read any of this, but these are the 25 questions from our money health check quiz, and the columns at the front are the initial responses, and the columns at the back are what people tell us at the end of the service. And you can see against each of those indicators there's been improvements as a group across the service. But just taking a few of those key ones where we've had the biggest impact, you can see, so for instance, on the far right of this slide, one of the questions we ask is, are you sure you're getting all the help that you're entitled to from the state? And at the start, less than 1 in 5 people said yes. By the end, over 3/4 had actually used a benefits check or benefits calculator and identified whether or not they might be entitled to more. Other key questions where people scored very low to start with: do they even know where to find help if they had money problems? Do they feel certain their money will last a month? Could they keep food on the table? Are they free of debt and rent arrears, or at least taking action? And these are the indicators where we've had the biggest success, helping people through an action plan, through money coaching, to turn those answers that were negative at the start into positive by the end of the service. In terms of employment-related indicators, we have a number of questions that are built into this sort of triage process, if you like, that will help us understand whether or not people feel really employable. I think since I produced this slide a little while ago, we now use the job readiness quiz much more, and they're much more targeted on specifically employment related questions. So where Beth said about skills being a key issue, one of the questions we ask, if somebody asked you to list 6 key skills and qualities you have that would make you right for the job you want to go for, could you list them now? So those sort of, again, still yes no questions, but where we can identify, oh, actually if they couldn't, then that might be an area of work we could develop to help support their employability. I also mentioned the 7 Signs program and the 7 Signs. So the book I mentioned earlier as my proudest achievement is actually called 7 Signs. So it was called I'm Ready, 7 Signs That Show You're Right for the Job. And these are the 7 signs. We have a 2-day 7 Signs employability event. Don't want to call them workshops, don't want to call them training. They're for people who are unemployed to come along. They might not even see themselves as job seekers to start with, but it's really where we just have relatively informal conversations, but as a group. I'm not a tutor really, but I'm more a facilitator. And these are the 7 signs. So the first one is vision. So for instance, we role play the recruitment process, where in small groups they look at 3 candidates. They've only got a elevator pitch to go by, or a personal statement to go by, and they've got a job description. They have to kind of assess using equal opportunity scoring, say, well, actually this person seems to fit the job better. And one of the lessons from that is the person who say I'll take any job doesn't really inspire employers to take them on, compared to people who can actually match their skill set to the job that's available. So that elevator pitch where you would write in your vision is something suddenly people go, actually, I think I might be going about job search in a way that could be better. And that vision really needs, we lean into skills and passions. So there's the hedgehog concept is something in a book by Jim Collins called Good to Great. And the idea is, if you can match the opportunities to make money to your skills and your passions, the things that would get you out of bed in the morning, then that's probably the goal you should be going for. So a fox tries lots of things, they go for any job in this context. Whereas the hedgehog knows one thing, which is how to avoid being captured and eaten. And so what's the one hedgehog thing? What's the one big thing that you could do? Let's look at what job opportunities exist, what skills and qualities you have, and what your passions are. So for instance, one person I work with who had been volunteering on reception in a homelessness charity one time came to 7 Signs, and as we were talking, it turned out that every night of the week he would go to his local community centre and play table tennis. He absolutely loved it. And I said, well, would you not consider applying for work in reception or admin for a leisure centre where everyone you're working with every day wants to, be involved in exercise and activity? And he said, I'd never thought of it like that. And it sort of face lit up, and it just gave him something to go for, and with some motivation and some confidence, because he had the skills and it was something he enjoyed doing. We also get on the 2-day program, we also get people to role play workplace scenarios, which gives them a kind of new lens to consider things through the employer's point of view, which at the end of the day is how you are judged as a job seeker. So actually taking people through issues that might be around, arriving late or taking longer lunches or fag breaks. But also there's a scenario there sort of like dealing with a personal hygiene issue. And we get those small groups of job seekers to think about what they would do if they had to address that situation, why it's important, what impact it has on other people in the workplace. So without telling people you must have a shower and use deodorant before you go to work, we get people to thrash those things out between them and to understand what the dynamics are and to hear each other's point of view. So there's a kind of socialization goes on there as well. So without preaching, we're able to sort of promote rights and responsibilities of people who will be, we hope, moving into the workplace. A lot of the people that we're working with, long-term unemployment in itself is a barrier to future employment, but all the things that may come with that, they may have mental health issues, have a criminal record, they may have been homeless. All of those things would suggest that at some point somebody's going to need to ask for help at some point, right? So being able to do that in the right way at the right time and know what they should be able to expect in terms of support from the employer is a really important of the 7 signs, really important one of the 7 signs to help people have the confidence that, okay, I don't need to say that at the start, but I might need to say it at some point in the future. So this is how I would do it. Then there's motivation. So feeling like this is what I'm going for, this is the job goal I've got, this is what I want to do. So actually having to get up and go to start making those applications and having the confidence to do that. And of course, without all those, with all those things, they're not much use if you can't present them on paper, in an application, or online in an application, or in an interview, or in a CV. So being able to sort of present all that to an employer is really important. Packaging it up and saying, look, I am ready and I'm right for the work. So that's the 7 signs. Just sort of pretty much close to the end now. So the key steps as money guiders, we can help clear the way. We can tackle those financial blockers that can keep people's minds closed to longer term and bigger scale opportunities. We can give them a sense of control and the confidence to take action on those longer term steps and provide them with a set of options. And at this point, people should be closer to being able to make real use of mainstream employment support that perhaps they haven't been ready for until this point. Just a reminder that, of course, there are loads of resources. The Money Helper website, all available for money guiders. If we're talking about clearing the blockers, then knowing that there's somewhere to go in order to be able to get the resources dependent on what support people need is good to know. So finally, from me, really, then a call or a request that you join our professional network, which I mentioned at the moment. We're on about 5,500 people subscribed to this at the moment. If you like some of what we say, I feel like I've been talking for hours, but if any of it resonated, it's the sort of thing that we put into our monthly newsletters and updates and into future events as well. So our next event is not specifically in partnership with the Money and Pension Service, but if you like where we're coming from, we're going to be doing a free to join webinar called Changing the Conversation. And this one in March is going to be looking more at how do we engage those communities who feel sort of disaffected, left behind, left in the dark, and who might be turning to other sources of information that might not always have their best interests at heart. How can we reconnect as money guiders, as service providers with those communities? And that is me.
Amazing. Thank you, Jeff. That's great. Michelle, did you want to jump in here, or should we move into the Q&A?
Yeah, let's jump. A huge thank you to Jeff and Lisa for a really informative session. It was really interesting to hear the different perspectives. I think we've got one question already in the chat from Anne-Marie, but how do people make referrals to your service, or are you only supporting people referred via DWP?
So no, we're not only taking referrals from DWP. There is on our website, cleanslateltd.co.uk, there is a contact us tab. And basically it's all our currently running programs are listed there. And so if someone's in an area where we're funded to support them, then there's a referral form that drops down there. But failing that, drop us a line, actually, because there might be something that we can connect people to. Otherwise, there's the self-serve resources that we have available on the Quids In website, which is quidsinmagazine.com.
Okay. Did
Just
anyone
putting
want
that
to,
link in the posts in the chat? There you go.
did anyone want to
Thank
come
you.
off mute or ask a question verbally or in the chat? I've got one here. Have you worked with many displaced people?
Some, yes. So if we're talking about refugees and asylum seekers, no. Refugees, yes. And I'm just thinking, so one of the great things we were able to do was to recruit one of the Ukrainian refugees who came over. They are displaced, not necessarily refugees. There's so much terminology. So we had a Ukrainian person who came over and who became a peer worker for us. We really hoped that we'd be able to use that to kind of cascade information and support to other Ukrainian people wherever we work. So yeah, we do. One of the things that I like about our approach is, although we do get into the sort of very personal ins and outs of how much you as a job seeker have to offer, there's a kind of leveling process at the door, which is, well, all that, all the baggage and all of the barriers, kind of leave them at the door. When we're here together, we're working as job seekers, and we're, in the same way as employment works for people in the workplace. You don't carry that label with you, so it means that we can work with pretty much anyone in the same sort of space. That so it's kind of like we're doing a job, but the job is job seeking.
We've got another question from Lorraine. Are you able to support those who have transferred into employment from benefits who find themselves with an overpayment to pay back? That's a really good question.
Yes, in principle we can. Again, it depends on where we are and where we're funded, what we're funded to do. I think that would slip straight into our sort of money health check to identify, is there anywhere where we can help people free up other resources, whether that's sort of so it wouldn't be missed benefits necessarily in this case, but there are other ways to sort of tighten their belt, but also work with people to kind of build their confidence to access specialist support and advice as well. We deliberately work outside of the regulated space, but we have really good relationships with debt advice providers, housing advice providers, mental health support, so that we can refer people in and sort of coach people through that process. So if it gets to a very specialist and regulated area of conversation, then we're very sort of diligent about making sure they're getting the specialist support. But if it's so, it could be about challenging a decision, in which case we probably work with citizens advice or someone like that. But we would be able to sort of like walk alongside people to kind of work out what their options are at that point.
And this isn't a question, it was a statement from earlier with Britta said, one of our local charities helps mothers with their skills as mother and homemaker to such as like organisation skills, timekeeping, planning and budget. And you did touch on this in your presentation about the softer skills. And this is a question from me. Sometimes, especially with the long-term unemployed, or when you mention people that perhaps have grown up in households where nobody has ever worked, those sort of softer skills in terms of like coming into work on time, which are basic perhaps, but to them are quite hard to overcome. In terms of time scale, how long on average does it take to work with the kind of like most as traditionally called hard to reach? Would you say? I know it's like not fixed on what is a kind of like an individualistic thing, but it does take quite a bit of time, doesn't it, to get that kind of work right?
Yeah, obviously it all depends on the individual, and so our optimum service delivery length duration really is 6 weeks, and that's 6 weeks of weekly coaching and a really clear action plan for people. We do find that we establish a really strong rapport and relationship of trust very early on. One of the sort of unintended but brilliant consequences of the process that we have, where we take people through those yes/no questions, is that it is a process, as much as it is at our end digital, it is a process that is active listening. You're actually taking down the key issues that are really important, and then feeding back on the things that where people could do with some support, so they feel heard. And because the nature of, well, everyone saw Beth there, the nature of our money coaches is that they have that empathy, they often have the lived experience, so they can connect with people. So that speeds up that process. I think the 7 Signs program, again, sort of really treating individuals as individuals, but also, while you're here, we're called Clean Slate for a reason, right? Everyone has a clean slate while you're in this room with us. And so it's kind of right now, let's find out how much you have to offer and sort of package that up. So it can be quite a quick process, a sort of realization that, oh, wait there, I could do that. But the skills of being a parent, I talked to someone who had been homeless and could only list being a parent as what they did, and I said, that's brilliant. And now let's talk about planning, organization skills, responsibility, care and compassion, and all those things. And it was just you could just see that with the right job goal, he could use that to sort of as a real confidence boost that actually, yes, he could do that job.
Did anyone else have any questions? Oh, we've got here in the chat. Do you offer a phone service? I have an
agoraphobic.
So I can try to say that word. A client who is being sanctioned. He does access the internet. A good question as well.
We do. I think our phone service is in some ways our sort of strongest service, because it gives the flexibility around, so not just for agoraphobic clients, but also people who've got caring responsibilities or disabilities that means that they can't get to a face-to-face drop-in. It really offers a complementary service, or a service that's complementary to services that are face-to-face. So yes, we do have that. It does depend on where someone is and what programs we currently have at the moment, but yes, we do have that. We do have a phone service.
So there's another question just above that from Phoebe as well
about computers. So yes, so so one of the things, again, so the phone service was developed during the pandemic, because how else were we going to get information to people, especially if they had weaker IT skills. We also did a piece of work, well, not a small piece of work, a big piece of work with the Good Things Foundation, which is the national digital inclusion charity. And what we did with them was we said, what we're interested in is giving people the confidence and the skills to use IT and computers that match their needs and wants. So we did a lot of work on developing the action planning system, so that quiz that I mentioned before, to make sure that built into that action plan were lots of links so people could follow them. So rather than putting them on a course, we can refer them to courses, and actually the Good Things Foundation they have a whole suite of online courses that will take people through IT, and they also have a network of financial inclusion hubs around the UK as well, which are on standby to sort of take referrals of people who want that sort of face-to-face, that sort of in-person support. But what we do within the action plan that we send, so we've got links, so there'll be a link to a benefits calculator, for example, and then our money coach can walk someone through, assuming they've got a device that they're not talking to us on, they can then we can talk them through and walk them through that process of using a benefits calculator. The same with, and we ask about IT skills. Can you upload a photo? Can you post a comment? Can you do a Google search. So if someone says no to that and that's somewhere they want to start, then our money coach can take them through that process to sort of learn by phone. But it's learning by doing as part of their process, or part of their process towards financial well-being and resilience. But if they feel like, oh, this isn't getting me anywhere, or this is great, I can see how to do it, but I really want to learn these skills, then at that point we can refer them into that specialist training support.
Okay, I think that's it on questions. Oh, yes, I think that's it. We ask as well, if you can, you don't have to put this in the chat, but we would like these to be beneficial for everybody. So to have a think about your key takeaway from the session, you can drop it in the chat if you like, or send an email to me later, just about whether it could be a knowledge takeaway, a skills takeaway, or a connection takeaway, something that you've learned about for today. It's really important to us that you get a tangible asset from all our workshops that we deliver on. And then we do ask, if you've got 1 or 2 minutes, for you to fill in our feedback form. It's really important to us that we get your feedback to not just reflect on this session, but for us to deliver what you would like. The network is for you. It's not about what we want. So we would really welcome any feedback that you have on sessions that you would like, any ideas that you have that we can shape the network. Please let us know. I'd be really grateful. And also, we've got quite a lot of events coming up ourselves, both in Wales and across our other networks. I'll put the link to those in the chat now. If you haven't already, you can join our Knowledge Hub, and that will give you access to all the resources from our sessions. I'll also be sending out the resources from today, so the slides and the recording at a later date, and I'll put in all these links so you don't have to grab them just yet. But yeah, next month we've got quite a lot of sessions coming up in Wales. One next Friday on women, domestic abuse and gambling. We've got a core value session, which is a really interesting session about looking at values in terms of money guidance for both you and for the customer. And then we've got another session with here about understanding gambling harms, and one about how to have productive money conversations. But if there's no more questions, we're happy to give you a little bit of 10 minutes time back if you'd like. But just let us know. But a big thank you again to Jeff and Lisa, and thank you to everybody for engaging in the session. We really appreciate it.